Hello everyone! Today I will tell you why if it's mafia then it's Italian. Why has the Russian mafia gained such popularity in pop culture? What do large corporations have in common with the Yakuza? How do Mexican cartels recruit newcomers? Why is the word mafia not mentioned once in The Godfather, the most popular mafia film? And what about the scary criminal syndicate on motorcycles? Let's start with Italy. It is there that the very first and most classic mafia was born. The Italian mafia, like any other, is diverse. It consists of different clans and families, and it's unlikely that anyone would argue that the most famous one is the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. In the 13th century, Sicily was plundered by French mercenaries. Sicilians didn't like that very much. So they gathered resistance, armed themselves, and stood up against the attackers under the slogan "Death to France, long live Italy." Based on the initials of the Italian words, the well-known word mafia emerged, which was used to refer to professional fighters who had grown out of the resistance members. At the end of the 19th century, many Sicilian families emigrated to America due to poverty and internal wars. By the beginning of the 20th century, Cosa Nostra, from a group guaranteeing protection to orange and lemon plantations, had transformed into an international network with a hierarchy stricter than some monarchies after facing pressure from authorities and interclan wars. But what does the mafia do now? It's unlikely that they still protect fruit shops, right? Today's mafia is no longer just farmers who once united for self-defense. They are clans that control the entire corporations. For example, the disposal of commercial waste from major US cities. Can you feel it? Their sphere of interest has long expanded beyond simple extortion. In the 21st century, the mafia engages in online betting, control over government procurement, and if drug or arms trafficking wouldn't surprise anyone in today's video, what about the trade in nuclear materials? Yes, they are involved in that too. The Mafia Code is closely intertwined with the Holy Scriptures. Before engaging in any profitable enterprise, mafia members must obtain the approval of the Don and agree in advance to give him a portion of the earnings. The traditions still adhere to the rules of blood vengeance, but again we remember the hierarchy. To seek revenge for a killing, a member of the family must obtain permission from the Don. Get permission, and he can engage in shootouts with dozens of victims in the finest traditions of The Godfather. By the way, speaking of the movie, it so happened that in the first film of the legendary trilogy, the screenwriters never used the word mafia or the name Cosa Nostra. And if you thought it was due to the government's struggle against the propagation of violence and crime, you would be wrong. It was the mafiosi themselves who demanded the removal of all references to the mafia. In 1970, they created a public organization called the Italian American Civil Rights League to protect the mafia's image in Hollywood films. It all started small, with protest actions against the film's release and telephone threats. Then they stole a truck with filming equipment worth $1 million. The climax was the assassination attempt of Albert Ruddy, the producer of The Godfather, in his car, after which filmmakers and mafiosi sat down at the negotiating table and agreed that the words mafia and Cosa Nostra would not be in the film. And now we have a bold motorcycle mafia bursting into our list. For many years in America, when people talked about bikers, they meant the Hells Angels. While the Angels called themselves a motorcycle club, many law enforcement agencies in different countries consider them a dangerous criminal syndicate. The Angels emerged in California in 1948 after the merger of several motorcycle clubs and adopted a skull with wings as their emblem. According to one version, because the club's founder Arvid Olsen was a pilot in the United States Air Force. It's not easy to join the club, and it's even harder to leave. And as they say in a well-known movie, the first rule of the club is you do not talk about the club. Drugs are also forbidden for them, and you can easily get a beating if you show up at a biker rally on a Suzuki or a Yamaha. Only Harley, only hardcore. The Hells Angels unite 25 chapters from 9 countries in North America and Europe. Representatives of the organization insist that their main goal is to ride their Harleys for their own pleasure, organize gatherings, and engage in volunteering. But they're not just cheerful guys in leather vests traveling the world on steel horses. The Hells Angels have a track record of extortion and prostitution, drug and stolen goods trafficking, violent crimes and murder. Despite the criminal history of the organization, the process of joining the Hells Angels is described as entirely legal but complex. To simply become a candidate, a person must have a valid driver's license and a motorcycle with a displacement of no less than 750 cubic centimeters. After that, they may spend several years attending only certain club meetings without the right to vote. The candidate is carefully scrutinized before being transferred to the status of a prospective member, as they're called in the Hells Angels hierarchy. In essence, there is still the same prospect with the patch, entrusted with delivering pizza or changing the motor oil for regular club members. They're not involved in any serious business. You might call it hazing, and you would be right. The status of a club member can only change through a general vote. Along with that, the patches on the vest are changed, which by the way is sacred to the Hells Angels. Only club members have the right to wear it. If a biker is arrested, the first thing they must do is pass their vest to their friends to avoid tarnishing its honor with imprisonment. And in case of a traffic accident, these bikers do everything possible to avoid cutting or removing the vest. For a Hells Angels member, the club comes first, followed by family, work, career, money, and so on. Well then, shall we move on to something tougher? Yakuza. Although the members of the Yakuza themselves refer to their organization as a chivalrous society. The Japanese Mafia, which entered the Guinness World Records as the most influential criminal organization. Descendants of Ronin who formed groups in the 17th century. Now it is a numerous mafia that has enveloped all of Japan with its influence and has bases in the United States. Prostitution, illegal immigration, extortion, pornography distribution, smuggling, underground gambling, nowhere without arms and drug trafficking, murder and violence. But this is the Yakuza. They also participate in election campaigns by sponsoring certain political parties. And like any corporation, the Yakuza has offices in major cities in Japan. And everyone knows it's the Yakuza office. There is even a sign. Like any large company, the Yakuza often assists their country in times of major disasters. For example, in 2011, after the earthquake and tsunami, they provided shelter to the affected people in the city of Kobe and even helped in rebuilding homes. The Yakuza consists of 3 influential clans that periodically experience divisions, leading to bloody wars. To join the largest clan, the Yamaguchi-gumi, recruits must pass a comprehensive examination consisting of a 12-page test on knowledge of Japanese laws, the fundamentals of thievery, and other skills. Yakuza, as descendants of samurai, place great importance on a strict hierarchy. Members of the organization must unquestionably obey the boss, and if someone upsets or disobeys the boss, that Yakuza member must cut off a section of their own finger. Usually they start with the pinky. This tradition dates back to medieval times when losing even a part of a finger weakened one's grip on a sword, making them less capable in battle. Even the vibrant tattoos that sometimes cover the entire body of a Yakuza member are done using medieval techniques by specially trained masters. This process can stretch on for long hours. Thus, the tattoos themselves become proof that the Yakuza can endure tremendous pain and possesses resilience and courage. And finally, you may remember the movie Kill Bill and the head of the Tokyo Mafia portrayed by Lucy Liu. Yes, despite the patriarchal structure of the Yakuza, this heroine has real prototypes. There have been cases where after the assassination of an influential boss, his sister or wife took over the clan and commanded due respect. And now let's move on. The Mexican Mafia was formed in the 1950s to provide protection. Protection for Mexicans in U.S. prisons. The Mafia protected fellow citizens from the abuse of prison guards and other inmates. Over the next 20 years, these defense groups evolved into the Mexican Mafia, remaining separate factions and drug cartels. The most influential and powerful drug cartel in the world is the Sinaloa cartel. Just imagine, they use cargo ships, airplanes, helicopters, and submarines for drug transportation. Quite an operation to say the least. The influence of the Sinaloa cartel extended to several states in Mexico, 12 countries in Latin America, and a network of 42 cities in the United States. They even reached Europe and Australia. A distinctive feature of the Sinaloa strategy is deep infiltration into the country's structure, preparatory work, acquaintances with figures in business and politics, and the establishment of advantageous relationships with the criminal community. If you still think such a pragmatic approach is too suspicious, let me assure you, their strategy of staying in the shadows, not attracting public attention, was shattered by their thirst for violence and bloodshed. The leader of the syndicate, El Chapo, did not hesitate to commit indiscriminate killings. By the way, we have an interesting video about El Chapo that you can watch through the link in the description. Members of his cartel tortured people, dissolved bodies in caustic vats, beheaded individuals, and engaged in many other very gruesome activities. They often posted videos of their murders on the internet as warnings to other cartels. The TV series Narcos Mexico, Ozark, and Queen of the South were based on the history of the Sinaloa cartel. But did you know that there is a mafia group called the Sleepers that is in a deep sleep in an underground bunker and controls the global economy through artificial intelligence technologies? The group has created its own cryptocurrency and uses it to finance its secret projects, including the development of cutting-edge technologies that allow them to control people's minds. Some people believe that the Sleepers can awaken at any moment and seize power of the world. Sounds like fiction, doesn't it? In reality it is, but who knows? Perhaps there is a similar organization somewhere that we just don't know about yet. The next criminal organization is directly linked to the Mexican cartels I just mentioned. Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, emerged in the 1980s and quickly integrated into the Mexican mafia, engaging in illicit activities alongside the Sinaloa and Los Zetas syndicates. The Maras hired hitmen, assisted in drug trafficking, and carried out punishment executions. Over time, the gang transformed into a powerful criminal network worldwide. Their tactic involves taking control of entire urban districts. Shops in these areas can give up to half of their profits to the Maras, and other gangs pay tribute for the opportunity to trade drugs in their territory. The Maras are also involved in arms and human trafficking. But what about their rituals? The Maras are known for their tattoos, often covering their entire bodies. These tattoos are not just gang markers, they represent a person's personal criminal history. Within the gang, members communicate using the dead language of the Aztecs called Complique. They have their own court and even their own prison in El Salvador. Only Maras are held there, and the perimeter is guarded by soldiers from the Salvadoran army with no other guards inside. No one survives inside that prison except members of the Mara Salvatrucha. And of course, the initiation ritual. How does one become a Mara? If someone truly wants to join the MS-13, they must endure 13 seconds of mass, uncontrolled strikes to the groin delivered by current Mara Salvatrucha members. Although this poses a risk to one's physical health, there are those who are willing to endure it. It's time to talk about the phenomenon of the Russian mafia, which emerged with the fall of the Iron Curtain. The wave of crime that flooded abroad in the early 1990s surprised experts, especially with its interests. While other mafias may have had an interest in sports, it was usually through fixed fights and bets. The Russian mafia, however, demanded tribute from Russian hockey players playing in the USA and Canada. This was in addition to the standard mafia activities such as extortion and trade in illegal goods, especially weapons and antiques. They were also known for their reckless shootouts. In general, one could say that the portrayal of the Russian mafia in movies with someone speaking with a distinctive Slavic accent, drinking vodka in the mornings and shooting subordinates and enemies without hesitation did not come out of nowhere. However, by the mid-2000s, the Russian mafia was no longer recognized as a state threat by either the United States or many European countries. The authorities who had once come to the West were either imprisoned, dead, or had legalized their activities and were operating legitimately to cover their shadow businesses. But then where did the myth come from? It's simple. In the United States, Canada, and Europe, anyone from the former Soviet Union, regardless of their background, has been labeled as part of the Russian mafia since the early 1990s and still is to this day. Anyone who speaks Russian or with a Slavic accent is immediately associated with this category. Thus, the Russian mafia appears to be omnipresent, terrifying, and elusive, although statistically its criminal presence has diminished. To end on a less somber note for the mafia, let's remember China and its triads. According to legend, the triads were founded by monks. After years of wandering, they returned to find their temple in ruins. They gathered and decided to seek revenge against the culprits. Centuries later, the triads have evolved into a powerful criminal syndicate. Engaged in gambling, drug trafficking, human trafficking, brothel management, and money laundering, The Chinese triads have increasingly infiltrated politics and often operate through legitimate businesses. Interestingly, the Chinese triads lack a rigid hierarchy. While they have a structure and participants within any clan or syndicate are divided into groups of 3, according to one member, they do not have to seek approval from the dragon head for their actions. The triads resemble a secret society with members using secret handshakes, passwords, and gestures. They have specific rituals. For example, during the initiation ritual, a candidate makes a sacrifice on a special altar and then drinks the blood of a sacrificial animal or their own blood, depending on the clan. In some cases, the first test for a newcomer is to walk across a room where knives are precariously suspended from the ceiling. Even the number 3 was not chosen by chance. It symbolizes the unity of a person with elements of earth and sky. And of course, triad members get tattoos. Bright, huge tattoos with dragons and phoenixes, although bosses usually avoid getting them to not stand out too much from civilians. But what does the triad do to those who cross them? 30 years ago, during executions, the executioner would cut whole layers of skin from a still living person and carefully ensured they didn't die prematurely from shock. Nowadays, the executioner inflicts thousands of small cuts on the victim, leading to a torturous and very slow death. The triad, a mafia group, still exists to this day, but its influence and activity have significantly declined in recent decades. In the 1990s, the Chinese government began cracking down on criminal groups, including the triads, and many of its members were arrested or killed. Despite this, the triad still controls various forms of criminal activities, including drug smuggling, weapons trafficking, counterfeit goods, and prostitution. It also has connections with other mafia groups worldwide and utilizes its influence to conduct business and earn money in different countries. Overall, the triad is still considered one of the most influential mafia organizations in the world, but its power and activity have been greatly limited compared to the past. Mafia groups continue to remain a serious problem for society in various parts of the world. However, thanks to improved law enforcement efforts and various measures to combat criminal activities, many major mafia clans have been exposed and dismantled. Modern mafia groups continue to engage in various types of crimes, including the use of advanced technologies. However, due to the efforts of law enforcement agencies and the awareness of citizens, the crime rate is decreasing and mafia groups are feeling the full weight of the law. It is important to understand that the fight against mafia groups is not only the responsibility of law enforcement agencies, but also of every individual in society. It is up to us as citizens to determine the kind of world we create around us. Remember that together we can make our world better and safer. And this was Pancake. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and watch the video about El Chapo. Wishing you all a great mood and see you in the next interesting episode.